Okay, let us start. Class, let us recall the variable costing method. We have learned the comparison of absorption costing and variable costing. Under absorption costing, we have sales less cost of goods sold will give you your gross profit less expenses will give you your net income. Under variable, we have sales then less all the variable cost that will give you your contribution margin, and then less fixed costs or expenses will give you your net income. Class, in Cvp analysis, we are going to use the variable costing. However, we are going to just concentrate on the basic elements of the variable costing, which are sales, then the variable cost will give you your contribution margin, less fixed costs or expenses will give you your net income. Okay, we are not going to go on the details of the different variable cost and the different fixed cost. Okay, we will use this basic variable costing method. Okay, class, let us move on. Okay, in performing the CVP analysis, we are dealing with a cost. That's why it's CVP cost. So the two costs are the variable cost and fixed cost. And V stands for the volume of sales. Okay, so we will have here also the amount of sales. And P is for the profit. Okay, so take note: cost, volume, and profit. And the relationship on this is linked by what you call contribution margin. Okay, so contribution margin is the excess of sales revenues over variable cost. Okay, so that is your contribution margin. In the analysis, it is suggested that contribution margin is presented in amount, per unit, and in ratio. Okay? If we are going to do a CVP analysis, it is best that you are going to present this in terms of amount, per unit, and ratio. So we will have three columns. And the three columns are for amount, per unit, and in ratio. Okay, we have to get the contribution margin in amount, per unit, and ratio. Okay, like in this illustration, the per amount is 100,000, then the per unit contribution margin is 2 pesos. These are just assumption. Okay, and in ratio we can express it in percentage. We have to express it in percentage. Okay. Okay, class. I would like us to remember the basic equations or assumptions in performing CBP analysis. The first one is, in ratio, sales is given at 100%. So this is already given. Okay, sales is always 100%. That is given. Okay? So in this case, if it is 100% and you have here 40%, so obviously you know already the ratio of your variable cost. Okay? Then we have to use transposition to find the missing value. Okay? This is the basic formula. The amount, which is this, okay, it will be the number of units here, the number of units times the per unit price or cost. So in this case, okay, what is given is the amount and the per unit. So we have to use the transposition to find the missing value. So in this case, the number of units will then be the amount divided by the price or cost per unit. Okay? So with that, we will be able to determine the number of units. Okay, so the number of units is equivalent to, with that equation, 50,000. Okay, so for the number of units sold for the amount of contribution margin and the per unit. If one of these is missing, just do the transposition. Okay? Okay, so if the price or cost per unit is missing, then you have to do this equation, amount divided by the number of units. Okay? Okay, class. So, class, if contribution margin less fixed costs or expenses will be your net profit. In case that we do have, okay, uh, a certain amount here, okay, so we will just have to deduct that from the contribution margin, and that will be your net profit. Okay, class? So let us have an illustration. This is just a basic problem of CVP. Molly Company sells 20,000 units at 12 per unit. Variable cost is 9 per unit and fixed cost is 25,000. Determine the following: contribution margin ratio, unit contribution margin, and income from operations. Okay? So as I have said, let us use our template. Sales less variable cost equals contribution margin less fixed cost equals net income or loss. Then we have to present this in amount and in per unit and ratio. Okay? Now, we have to, based on this format, we can now put in what are given. So here, 20,000 units, we put it there, 20,000 units sold. 12 per unit. So, sells 20,000 at 12 per unit. So that would be the selling price per unit, which is 12. Okay? Variable cost is 9 per unit. So variable cost per unit is 9. Okay? And then the fixed cost is 25,000. Okay? So here, what we have to find is contribution margin ratio. So that is contribution margin ratio. Okay, next, unit contribution margin. So contribution margin, so unit contribution margin. And income from operations. So this is C, the income from operations. Okay? So based on this, now it is more easier for you to solve the required items. Okay? So here, contribution margin ratio, you are asked this one. However, it is best that you have, because these are already available. So the first thing that you can compute is B, because it is only 12, which is sales less variable cost. So the amount will be 3. So here you can answer letter B. Okay. Now, if you have this contribution margin, what you just have to do to get the contribution margin ratio is you have to divide it by its selling price. So 3 over 12 will give you 25%. So the answer for A is 25%. And now income from operations, okay? So here, class, you know that your contribution margin per unit is 3, and you know that the units sold is 20,000. So you can just multiply 20,000 by 3 to get your contribution margin. And based on this, 60,000 minus 25,000, you have 35,000, and you can already answer letter C in the amount of 35,000. You don't have to get this anymore because this is not required. Okay, however, if it is required, then you have to fill it up. Okay, class? So here, if you want to fill up everything, 100% is the sales. So we can now get 9 divided by 12, 75. So it is correct. Okay, class? And 240,000, how did we get 240,000? 12 times 20,000 will give you 240. And similarly, 9 times 20 will give you 180,000. So 240 minus 180, it's 60,000, okay? Okay, class, let us discuss break-even point. The cost volume profit analysis is also known as break-even analysis. Okay, so at break-even point, the profit is zero. Okay, there is no income, there is no loss. So the profit is zero. Okay, let us take a look of our template wherein we have sales less variable cost will give you your contribution margin, less fixed expenses will give you your net profit. So we have to express this in amount per unit and in percentage. Okay, and let us have this our number of units sold. Okay, always this template. Okay, class. So here at break even point, what we are saying is that the profit is zero. Okay, so assuming that we have a fixed expenses of 200,000, then obviously because you have a zero profit, then your contribution margin should be equal with your fixed expenses because you have a zero profit. Okay, so in this case, at break-even point, contribution margin is equal to your fixed cost. Okay, so meaning that your contribution margin was able to recover in full your fixed expenses. Okay, so if you have a contribution margin higher than fixed expenses, then that will be your profit. So in this case, if we have a sales of 1 million, okay, how much will be your variable cost? So 1 million minus 200,000, so your variable cost will be 800,000, okay? And besides, okay, we also have to express that at break-even point, sales is equivalent to cost. And the cost will include variable cost plus fixed cost. So in this case, 800,000 plus 200,000 is equivalent to your sales. So this is only for break-even point, okay? The break-even point in volume units and in amount can be determined by the contribution margin per unit and ratio respectively. So what we are trying to say here, if you are getting the break-even point in volume units, okay, you have to use the contribution margin per unit. And if you are going to get the amount of the break-even point, then you have to use the contribution margin per ratio. Okay? So here we have an example. This is our formula. Break-even point in units will be fixed cost over contribution margin per unit. Okay? For here, we will be able to get the number of units sold. And if we are going to get break-even point in amount, it will be fixed costs over contribution margin ratio. With this, we will be able to get this 1 million. Okay? Assuming that our per unit contribution margin is 2 pesos and our ratio is 20%, okay? And if we are going to substitute it with in our formula, break-even point in units is equivalent to fixed cost of 200,000 divided by 2. And you will get 100,000 units. So our number of units sold is 100,000. Okay. In amount, okay, we can calculate it 200,000 divided by 20% because we have to use the ratio. And you will get 1 million. Okay. However, we can also get it like if we know the per unit, okay, The selling price per unit, we can also determine it by multiplying it with the number of units sold. Okay? So here, the cost per unit, which is the selling price. Okay? This is the selling price per unit, which is, let me correct that. That is selling price, not actually the cost. Selling price per unit. Okay. So the selling price per unit can be determined by dividing the amount of 1 million with the number of units. Okay, that you will get 10 pesos. Okay, with that, you will be able to calculate it. Okay, class? So now let us discuss sales with the target profit. The break-even point formula is modified, so it means that we are still going to use the break-even point formula with modification to determine the number of units and the amount of sales to generate the desired or targeted profit by including in the numerator the desired profit. Okay, so the break-even point formula is modified to determine the number of units and the amount of sales to generate the desired or targeted profit by including in the numerator the desired profit. So this is our formula for break-even point in units. So with this is our formula, fixed cost over contribution margin per unit. So if we are going to use it with our desired profit, we are going to modify this. So it will be equals fixed cost plus the profit over contribution margin per unit. Okay, class? So in this case, same with the desired profit in amount, it will be fixed cost plus profit over contribution margin ratio. Okay? So with this, we will be able to uh, compute the number of units and the amount of sales for the desired profit. Okay. Okay, class. Assuming now that we have a profit here of 50,000, okay, and our expenses is 200. So, with this, we know that our contribution margin should be 250,000. Okay? And if we have a contribution margin per unit of 2 pesos and assuming that our ratio is 20%, we will, and if we want to apply this formula, so here the desired profit is 50,000. Okay, and then so our fixed cost is 200,000 plus 50,000 for the profit divided by 2, we will have the number of units is 125,000 units. So the units that need to be sold is 125,000. And for the amount of sales, it will be 200,000 plus 50,000 divided by 20%. You will get 1,250,000. Okay? By the way, class, in as much as we already calculated our per unit at 10, so we can also multiply 10 by times 125 will likewise give you 1,250,000. Okay? Okay, class. So now let us have some illustrations on the break-even point. Barker Corporation's fixed costs are estimated to be 90,000. The unit contribution margin is as follows. Okay? So here, what was given is unit selling price, 25,000, 25 per unit, and unit variable cost is 15. And these are what are the required things to be determined. number of units to be sold to break even, the amount of sales at break even, number of units to be sold at 20,000 profit, the amount of sales at 20,000 profit. If we have this kind of problem, what is important is we just have to get the unit contribution margin and proceed with the calculation based on our formula. Okay, we don't have to use the template because what is being asked is only the break even and the profit. I mean the number of units with a profit. Okay, so with this we can use the break even point formula. So here it is important that we know the contribution margin per unit. So which is you can compute it. Unit selling price per unit minus unit variable cost will give you your contribution margin per unit of 10. And you have to know also, because you are going to determine also the amount of sales, the ratio. So the ratio will be, by the way, this is the number of units, substituting it, 90,000. This is the fixed cost over 10. This is the contribution margin, and we have 9,000 units. Okay? And in amount, fixed costs over, we have to determine the contribution margin ratio. And we can get the contribution margin ratio by dividing 10 over 25, okay, which is the selling price. We will get 40%. So 90,000 divided by 40%, we will have a sales of 225. Or if the selling price is already given, okay, and we already know the number of units, you can just multiply 25 times 9,000, right, class? 9,000 times 25 will also give you 225,000. And for the desired profit, okay, in units, you have a desired profit of 20,000. So fixed cost plus profit of 20,000 over contribution margin will give you 11,000 units, okay? And for the amount of sales, same, but the denominator is your contribution margin ratio, will give you 275,000. And since that you already know the selling price per unit and the number of units, you can just multiply 11,000 times 25. You will also get 275,000. Okay, class? You have a lot of ways to solve the required item, okay? The required, what is required in the problem. Okay, class? Let us move on. Okay, this is a CVP analysis problem. The ABC company has the following data relative to CVP analysis. Okay, and these are sales of 270,000, variable cost of 180,000, operating income of 30,000, and price per unit is 9. And you are going to determine the following: variable cost per unit, contribution margin per unit, fixed cost contribution margin ratio, units sold, and break even in units and in amount. So class, I advised you that make sure that you are going to present it in the given template so it will be easier for you to analyze the problem. Okay? We have this template. Okay. So here sales is 270,000. So put the sales there. Variable cost is 180,000. Put the variable cost there. Operating income is 30,000. And price per unit is 9. Okay? So what are required? Variable cost per unit. So this one. This is the another given thing. Okay, A, and then contribution margin per unit, this is B, and C, fixed cost, and contribution margin ratio, units sold, Okay, break even in units. So we have to get our formula. So actually, break even in units and in amount. So we have the two formula. Okay, the first thing that we have to do is the variable cost per unit. So what are the information that we can use to compute A? We don't have the units sold and we only have the variable cost per unit. So the formula for variable cost per unit is variable cost amount over number of units. Okay, however, we don't know the number of units. But do you think, can we get the number of units? Yes, we can get the number of units because sales and the selling price are given. So with that, we can determine the number of units. So number of units is equivalent to 270,000 divided by 9 will give you 30,000. Okay, class. So that is the purpose, class, why we have to plug in, use the template so we can look the overall picture of the given items. Okay? So in this, we know that the number of units is 30,000. Okay? So next, we can now compute the variable cost per unit, okay, because we already have the number of units. So the variable cost amount is 180,000 divided by 30,000, you will get 6 pesos. So here you can get 6 pesos per unit. Now it's easier for you to compute this because you just have to deduct 9, deduct 6 will give you 3 pesos, okay? And letter D, you can already compute this by getting the CM ratio 3 over 9. Okay, will give you 33.33%. Considering that this is 100%, you can get already your variable cost ratio, which is 66.67%. But let us do first here the contribution margin, because 270 minus 180 is 90,000. So from actually you can already get the contribution margin here. You can start doing this, okay? And 90 minus 30,000 will give you your fixed expenses at 60,000. So with this, we can already compute our break-even point, okay? So here, 60,000 is the fixed cost. Contribution margin per unit is 3. So we will have here 20,000 as our break-even point. And in amount, 60,000 divided by the ratio of 33, and we will have here 180,000 as the amount of break-even point. Actually, we can get the 180,000. Okay, 20,000 times 9 will also give you 180,000. Okay, class? So if you have problem, class, please let me know. Okay? Bye for now, and hear me again on the next lesson that we will have.